Hey, here's a review off the top of my head for a film that I just watched. It's called Mamba. It was a two-strip Technicolor talkie from 1930 by a studio called Tiffany Studios that was an independent studio trying to go into competition against MGM and all the other, Paramount, all the big studios of the time. A pretty fascinating relic of a film that was considered for decades to be lost because the original negatives were burned in the fire in Atlanta scene and Gone with the Wind, and the whole Tiffany library went up in flames. But somewhat miraculously, one nitrate print survived almost entirely intact. There's a few minutes that were censored by the Australian authorities. But in Australia, this one couple, this guy who's a collector of old rare films, had one surviving print of this film, and that's basically why this Blu-ray exists. Let me turn the camera around, give you some of the visuals of the film, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. All right, Mamba is about this character. His name is August Bolte. He's a German plantation owner, supposedly the richest man in East Africa, and a thoroughly detestable, loathsome character. The woman in green there is the wife that he's basically purchased. She's a woman from a good background back in Germany, but her mother is in great debt. Her parents are basically, and they allow this slob of a man to buy their daughter for 200,000 marks. Just to basically settle their own estate. A kind of a commentary on arranged marriages and just the hideousness of the patriarchy as it was kind of in full unchecked power at the time. So yeah, racism, colonialism, patriarchy, it's a pretty dismal swamp of misery and raw power being exerted here. So the film can be sort of faulted because it does include many of those stereotypical assumptions, but there is a subversive underlying criticism of all of that, though it's not, blatantly on the surface what I would say an anti-racist movie or anything of that sort. But it does create some empathy for the people living under that kind of oppression, and certainly if you look at the villain figure as a representative of colonialism, he's pretty detestable, and I don't think colonialism is very well favored in the outlook of this film. But it is quite remarkable. This is Eleanor Boardman. She was the wife of King Vidor, a great silent era director, even though they split up shortly after this film was made. She gives a pretty effective performance as a woman trapped in a pretty wretched situation. Here's another scene that was definitely put in for a bit of spectacle, military formations, marching soldiers, a demonstration of colonial military power, all of that, using probably black extras, uncredited of course, with some marching and music, something that definitely was kind of a crowd pleaser for films of that time. This is the lead-in to the final kind of climactic battle scene that takes place when there is a native uprising. English and German forces have just learned that their countries are at war up in Europe, but now that they're down in the colonies in Africa, they also have to be at odds with each other. So there is a rivalry that extended the war down into Africa, even though the people down there, as far as the English and Germans were concerned, really didn't have a big beef with each other, but they were, as they say, merely following orders. So it culminates in a big kind of, spectacular shootout at the fort with the Germans definitely in danger as they're overrun by natives in rebellion, as you see in the subtitles there. Here's a look at kind of the climactic showdown here between Bolt and the natives getting their revenge. So, there is a sense of justice prevailing here because the repulsive, villainous character at the center of the film, for whom it's named, Mamba, the poisonous snake, he does kind of get his at the end. Of course, the colonial powers do prevail after the natives get restless and all of that. So it's a mixed bag film for sure. but still pretty fascinating relic of a film that many thought they would never see, and yet it did represent a pretty important advancement of Technicolor and sound film, and like I say, a pretty fascinating example of an early quasi-independent studio that didn't last too much longer into the 1930s as the economy went sour after the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression, and all of that. Tiffany Studios just did not have the wherewithal to hang in there when they were going toe-to-toe against the big boys. So, yeah, Mamba, fascinating film, great commentary, some interesting special features included in the overall package. A very nice release from Kino Classics, one that, if anything I've said here intrigues you, I definitely recommend. It's not a film you're going to watch a whole lot, but it's a pretty fascinating piece to have on the shelf and an interesting point of reference from a overlooked and forgotten era of Hollywood.